A seller's disclosure is a very, very important document at the time of purchasing or selling a house. The Pennsylvania law requires that a seller disclose every known material defect in their home at the time of listing their home for sale. So, my tips for the sellers and buyers. So, first, starting with the sellers on how to fill out that form. The first tip is fill it out completely. There's a lot of questions. It is pretty detailed. You want to fill out. There is yes answers, no answers, and unknown is also an option. So all the questions are worded like, are you aware? So you can say yes, no, or unknown. If you don't know the answer, it is best to check off unknown. Also, all the yes answers need an explanation. So are you aware of any leaks? Well, yes, and then you have to explain what the leak was about. Have you made any insurance claims? Well, if the answer is yes, you have to explain all the yes answers. So this is a time-consuming form. Set aside some time and sit, peacefully and write it out. It even requires some dates, like when was your roof put on, or when was your HVAC replaced, or when was it last serviced. Now, this may require you to go back and check your contractor receipts so that you can put in the accurate dates. But I highly recommend that you take the time and do that, right? So the second tip is, and this is a pro tip here, this is one document that survives settlement, right? There are many other documents that you may sign in the process of buying or of selling your home, which after the title company does their settlement are not as relevant. But seller's disclosure is an important document that survives settlement. So if there is something that is found later to be untrue or incorrectly represented in that seller's disclosure, the buyer may come back and sue you for that item. So it is very, very important that you take your time with it and do it right. The third tip for this one is use it to your advantage. There's a section in the seller's disclosure that talks about what updates has the seller made to the home, and oftentimes you may have replaced some appliances, kitchen updates, bathroom updates. You just replaced a roof. I would highlight all of those recent updates that you have made into your home, which will enhance the value of your home in the eyes of the buyers. Yes, they can see that new kitchen that you had installed, but the fact that it's in the seller's disclosure lets the buyer know that this wasn't how we bought the house. This is something that the seller updated in the home to make that recent change. And it'll reflect in the price that is being offered on the house. It draws attention to all the positives that you may have done around the house. Another tip for the sellers is be, again, honestly, going back to my point 2 and 3, being very honest and truthful, because there are some liabilities that are involved as well. So if your HOA has sent you a letter saying there's going to be a special assessment, or your township has sent you a notice saying, well, we're going to be, doing this, that, and the rest, and you will be required to pay this. No buyer likes to get unexpected bills after they buy the house. They need to be aware. And this is where the seller's disclosure requires the seller to disclose of any of these. So if the township has sent you letters, don't ignore them. If the HOA has sent you information, just be mindful if you're selling your home to be upfront and declare this to the next buyers and say, well, this assessment is coming up or that one is coming up. Because at the settlement, the title company, when you're signing the deed package in the presence of a notary, is going to ask you, have you disclosed everything? And, sometimes maybe at the time of seller's disclosure writing, you may have not known, but since then you do know. And that is where you have to stop and think, like, did something happen while we were under contract that I should be aware of, that I am aware of, that I should be telling the buyers about and the title company about. So if you've made recent changes and there are permits required for your job, like, you built a deck and you needed a permit, well, once the county assesses your home again, like if you finished your basement or if you put in a deck, the county reassesses your home sometimes and your tax bills may go up. That is something that you're required to disclose to the new buyers, right? So be careful of all your disclosures. Everything that you are aware of, you need to disclose. Some of the things that the buyers should be mindful of when they are going through this seller's disclosure. The first thing is absolutely read it. Many buyers just skip it. The DocuSign goes rather quickly and you're just initialing. You're like, I don't know, Bela keeps sending me these long, paperwork to sign. I'm just going to sign. Well, thank you for that trust, but I would like you to read the seller's disclosure because it tells you everything there is to know about this property. So it's kind of important that you read it. All the yes answers specifically, because those yes answers are supposed to have an explanation for, any issues that may have happened in the house, and that explanation can be pretty helpful. So, definitely read it. Secondly, keep in mind that this is only a disclosure of what the seller knows. Oftentimes, a homeowner lives in a house and may not necessarily know everything there is to know about the home. They may not know if the codes have changed, the building codes. They may not know if that, socket that is in their bedroom is working or not working, or whether it is GFCI protected or not. Or, they may have never been to their attic before. So this is only what the seller knows that they're disclosing. Everything else is for you to use a home inspection to find out. The third thing is, speaking of home inspections, in a competitive market when, people are waiving inspections, this is, July of 23, it is so important to kind of read this carefully because it will tell you about the condition of the property, and so you can make your bids accordingly, right? It will tell you how old the roof is or how old the septic tank is, so you know if you're going to have to replace it in the next few years coming up. It also tells you if the property had been rented or if the homeowner living in the property himself, or has it been vacant. Things like that will tell you a little more about the condition of the home, and there are certain assumptions we can make, and that will help us decide on what our bids and how competitive our bids are supposed to be, right, for these homes. Another place that the sellers often, miss, and we want to pay specific attention to, this is my point 4, is any permits that were obtained to, do some upgrades. Like I had a property where a basement was finished and the fire sprinkler system was not to code. So the seller was required to redo the entire fire sprinkler system, which is, a lot of money. So the seller is required to follow building codes, any township codes, and if there are any special updates that they have made to the home in the time that they have stayed there, we have to find out if permits were required for those updates and if they had been received. The seller's disclosure itself tells you whether the permits were obtained. There might be even some HOA assessments. Suddenly the HOA may say that your HOA fee is going up next month or onwards. Or it may say, oh, there's a specific expense that we need to undertake and there's a special assessment. Every homeowner is going to be required to pay this X dollars. Those kind of things need to be disclosed by the seller, and you need to be aware of any unexpected expenses that may be coming up in the future that you are responsible for. Another thing is talk to the realtor. Many times these realtors send you all these documents and things are moving so fast sometimes, they may not even be reading this stuff. So if you have any questions or any doubt in your mind, bring it to your realtor's attention and say, hey, Bela, line this, page this, I don't understand it. Or isn't the seller required to tell us this? And the realtor should be able to help you get answers to your questions. And so, protect yourself that way. Point number 6, seller's disclosure is the one document that survives settlement. So the seller is required to be completely honest and truthful in the document, because even after the sale, they can get sued for anything that they misrepresented or presented incorrectly. So we do believe everything that the seller is saying about the property. And again, this is only the material defects on the property. This is my last point. Oftentimes, buyers are very curious about why are the sellers selling their home? Did somebody die? Do they have financial hardship? Are they getting divorced? People are very curious in nature, in general. Well, the seller or their agents are not required to disclose any of this to us. If someone's dying or whatever is not a material defect in the house. In fact, there was a case that went all the way to Supreme Court where somebody had committed suicide in that house. And the buyer was very upset and said, this should have been disclosed to us. Well, the Supreme Court deemed that it is not a material defect in the house and it is not required to be disclosed. So the personal situation of the sellers is not something that is a requirement for disclosure, but only the material defects in the home. Hope this was helpful. Read that seller's disclosure. It's a very important document. That helps.